Hi guys, this is a video all about descriptive writing, which is paper 1 question 5. We're talking here about AQA for the GCSE in English language. And this is the question which is, I suppose, one of the more creative questions. You are now the writer, not the reader, and this is out of 40 marks, so it's a big question. And as you might know, you get an image. That image could be of anything. We've had many images in the past, like people or places or bus stations or transport or marketplaces, lots of different places. So we never quite know what the image is going to be. But we do know that it will generally be the same approach, which is you either write a story and or you write a piece of description about it. So this is slightly more to do with the descriptive writing side rather than the narrative side, the story side. But this video is not really looking at any particular past question. It's familiarising you and introducing you to a technique that I use with students called slow writing. And this isn't a new technique. I didn't think of this. It's been around now for quite a while, and you might have already done something similar. But the slow writing technique or an activity is designed to be a fun and creative way of practicing and refining your descriptive writing skills, because English is supposed to be about having fun and playing about with language. It's not supposed to be something we're afraid of because we use it every day anyway. So this is for this question. I'll be doing more videos on creative writing as well as time goes on. So in order for this technique to work, it's important that you're willing, I suppose, to practice your descriptive writing skills. And I know the exam board puts particular focus on drafting and redrafting and planning. So it's not a case of just sitting down to write it and it suddenly becomes perfect straight away. It takes practice, like learning to ride a bike or learning to play an instrument. So the slow writing technique, as part of that practice, forces you to think about what you are writing sentence by sentence. So it's quite a slow, as the name suggests, quite a slow technique. But it's slow because it's giving you the time to think about what it is you are writing. Sometimes students will rush, and when they rush, they lose the sense of detail and they lose a sense of imagery, for example, which is important to descriptive writing because you need to be very sensory with your language to create that evocative imagery. So this slow writing technique is designed to confront head-on the skills that you need to demonstrate in order to do well with descriptive writing. So those skills include sentence variation, word order, punctuation, but also the descriptive devices like similes and metaphors and alliteration and so on. So this is also an activity that you can practice by yourself in your own time, and I'm going to finish this video by giving you a slide that you could maybe screenshot and print out, which you can use independently. Because there's a lot of flexibility with this task, which I'll explain at the end. And as I said, English is supposed to be creative. It's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be willing to play with language and not be afraid of language, and really see what we can do with our descriptive writing. And it's often the case that when I've done this technique with students, they're often very impressed with what they write, because they are confronting their skills head on, and they're sometimes very surprised actually that they were capable of writing this, and it's those techniques that are guiding them, it's the rules that are guiding them. So in order to do this task effectively, in order to do the slow writing technique effectively, you need to know these 4 things. These are all quite intrinsic, I suppose, to a writing question, particularly for paper 1. So the language devices, the sentence types, so you can have those sentence variations, punctuation, particularly colons and semicolons, and also your word classes. So all of these skills will be practiced in this slow writing technique. So the reason why, again, it's called slow writing is because you've got to think of, well, what is that thing? What is a minor sentence? What is personification? And so on, in order to complete the instruction. So I'm going to be showing you 3 different images, all of which could realistically come up in the exam or something similar. And we're going to be using those 3 images to practice or to show you what this slow writing technique is all about. So the first image is this very beautiful image taken by, I think, Glenn and Kilpatrick, of a sunset, I presume, on a promenade by the sea. And we can see here a lovely colourful sky, oranges and mauves and pinks. We've got quite a rough sea. We've got 2 walkers there walking their dogs. almost huddling together in raincoats, bracing themselves against the wind and the wet. And we've also got some lovely painted beach huts there looking out to sea. So the first image I'm going to show you is this one. At this point, what I would do is I would show this to my students and I would say, okay, what's going on here? And, think about what we might want to focus on and what we might want to describe. The next thing I would do is, one by one, I will display these sentences on the board. So they won't see them all in one go. They will see each of these individually, and they will only see the next one once they've completed the one before. So they won't see number 2 until they've done number 1, and so on. So they're not bombarded with instructions. And you can see each of these sentences, each of these 10 things have an instruction in them. Your first sentence must start with an adverb. Your second sentence must include a simile. Your third sentence must be 4 words long, and so on. So each of these 10 things has a very explicit instruction, which is confronting a descriptive technique head on. So in order to write that sentence, students must know what these things are beforehand. What they are describing is this image. So they are using this image of this stormy sea and sunset in order to follow these instructions. Okay, so each of these 10 instructions will appear on the board one by one. They have about 2 to 3 minutes for each. They're really thinking about what they're writing. And what happens then is, because they are writing this as a normal paragraph, these 10 sentences will then join together to form a nice descriptive paragraph about the image. So by no means a completed response, but it's a practice. It's a nice, creative, short practice task to remind you of the devices. So I had a go at this because I quite like this activity. It's quite fun. I quite enjoy it. So I ended up writing something like this, and I was surprised that I wrote something like this, actually, because I don't think I would have written something in this way had I not had these instructions to guide me. So I ended up writing something like this. Maliciously, the rolling waves boomed into the sea wall. As they struck, a loud booming echoed throughout the bay like the deepest thunder. Rusty railings dripped constantly. Huddling for shelter, a couple of walkers tried to hide from the vicious spray, their dogs determined to carry on even if it meant they got splashed. The walkers, which were both wearing nylon raincoats and wellies, had wet hair streaming down their faces. A row of beach huts stared at the ocean that had been whipped into a fury from the storm. They were brightly coloured, their doors firmly padlocked until the days when holidaymakers would return. Mauve and orange, the clouds washed across the sky and were reflected in the surface of the sea below. Waves continued to crash, swirl, twist and whirl. Ocean froth. So I was quite surprised that I wrote that, actually. I was thinking it'd be quite nice to turn into a poem, maybe, even, because poetry can also be used as a descriptive tool, I suppose, to practice descriptive writing. But I was really happy and quite surprised with that, and it's not because I'm an English teacher, obviously, and I know these devices like the back of my hand, but it's the fact that I ended up writing this in a way that I would not have done had I switched those 10 sentences around, had I come up with different things. So, what you come up with is always different, and it's always nice to share what other students have in the room. And again, you might be very surprised of what you create, actually, because you're thinking sentence by sentence. What is it that I'm actually including in my sentence in terms of a device? So that's one example. The second example is of New York. A very different landscape. It looks like it's kind of sunset again. Southern tip of Manhattan by the Statue of Liberty. I went to New York last year, so I'm quite familiar with this kind of landscape, this kind of place. Very busy, very loud. The city that never sleeps. And we have there the World Trade Center, the tallest building there in the middle. So again, I would show students that image and then I would show them these 10 instructions one by one. They would have 3 minutes to complete each one, and in the end that would all come together to form a nice 10-sentence long paragraph. So same thing, let's have a look at what I wrote this time, and again I was surprised that I wrote this. The city before me filled the horizon, skyscrapers, tower blocks, a clear moon hanging like a light bulb. A featureless curtain of sky was suspended above. A crisp moonrise. Angular and steely, the skyscrapers reflected the blueness and a brushstroke of pink which had started to flood the lower part of the sky. The distant hum of traffic in the dense metropolis groaned in the pallid early evening light, with sirens screaming occasionally. Pointing upwards, the mast of the World Trade Center seemed to pierce the heavens, with a small red light twinkling at the top. A magical moon moved slowly, as the light began to gradually fade, turning the skyscrapers into towers of many rectangular lights. The water rippled, and the air turned cooler, turning into a watery patchwork of moving streaks of colour as night took hold. The surface of the water sparkled. The solitary silver disk of the moon continued to arc across the sky like an eye looking down on the city below. So again, each of those sentences, there's 10 sentences in that paragraph, following those specific 10 instructions that you can see there in that box on the right hand side. And again, I'm quite happy with that. I might change some of the word order maybe, but you can clearly see that I'm using those 10 instructions to really guide me into what I actually end up writing. Finally, third and final example is an image that came up, well, close to an image that came up a few years ago, which some students felt a little bit stumped by, which was an image of a man's face, quite a close-up of a man's face. And it stumped them because they thought there was less to describe, but I guess the technique was to try and give this man some kind of backstory, or to place this man within a wider setting that the picture didn't show you. So the successful students were the ones that put the man maybe in a home or in a hospital, or anywhere really, and that gave them something extra to describe. Remember with these pictures that you get in question 5 that you can add things into them. You can have some artistic license and add things into the image, and don't be afraid of doing that because it will give you more things to describe. So I would show that image. As you know, I would show the students each of these instructions, which would appear one by one on the board. Again, students might want to discuss what each of these are before they have a go at it. So you have lovely difference in what they write. And then finally, you would create a paragraph that had 10 sentences. And I ended up writing something like this. Weathered and wrinkled, the old man's face was scarred with the wounds of time. Memories filled every thoughtful crevice. His circular, glassy and fragile eyes peered out from their deep sockets. Sagging sallow skin stretched across his forehead beneath clumps of silver hair. The man, who had witnessed 2 world wars and married aged 18, was waiting in his chair for his wife to arrive. Slowly, the clock's hands above moved, mirroring the movement of the sun outside. More waiting. His mind was a blizzard of memories, all mixed and jumbled. He could picture faces that were familiar, but they had no names. He could hear sounds that he knew he should recognize, but couldn't quite decipher. Twisting his wedding ring on his finger slowly made his marriage seem more real, despite his wife passing away 10 years ago, of which he could not remember. So I kind of went here down the route of placing him maybe within an old folks' home and maybe suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. And, that metaphor of the blizzard, very confused, quite disorientated. So I didn't just describe what he looked like, I also described what he felt and what he may be thinking. So I became, what we might call an omniscient narrator. I was able to talk about what they looked like, but also what they thought, even though I'm not that person. It's also known as an all-seeing, all-knowing narrator. So again, there's 10 sentences there that have all joined together to make a paragraph. And again, I would not have written that had I not had those instructions in that order. Okay, so again, this is designed to be a very creative task. It's supposed to be fun. It's nice hearing what other people have written. And you might be impressed. You might really, be quite proud of yourself for, what you write, because you're thinking of this sentence by sentence quite methodically. Okay, so the last slide is what I started by talking about, which is this template, which you might want to screenshot and cut out. So we have here about 20 or so boxes with 20 or so features of descriptive writing. Some are punctuation, some are devices, some are sentence-based. The same kind of instructions that I've been using in those 3 images in this presentation. And what I would do is I would say to students, okay, take this home, cut these out, put them into a bowl, and take one out of the bowl at random, and have a go at finding an image off the internet, anyone that could come up in an exam, and describe it, And each sentence you are following a particular instruction, just like I have been talking about here. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. You could do 20, you could do 15, you could do 5. Just a quick 10-minute, 15-minute task where you are practicing and refining your descriptive writing skills. And who knows, the more images you look at, maybe something similar will come up in the exam. Okay, so that is the slow writing technique, a fun and creative task to do with paper 1 question 5, the descriptive writing question. Thank you.